Food is more than just what's on our plate. It's the places where it's grown, it's the people who grow it, and so much more. Join me, Janice Person, your host, on Grounded by the Farm every other week as we talk about the foods we love. Today I took a short drive outside of St. Louis to come over to the east side, across the river to Collinsville, Illinois. And I did not know this, but horseradish is a really big deal here.
Yeah.
So today we're going to be talking to Matt McMillan, and we're at a place called J.R. Kelly Company. And rumor has it, in the coolers behind me is like loads of horseradish. So I'm going to ask Matt all the questions. God love you, Matt. First time on a podcast.
Yeah,
I'm going to make it count.
Yeah, I'm very excited. Thank you for having me.
So when people think of horseradish, I could not find one specific thing that comes together. What is it that connects horseradish and makes people either love it or not like it?
It's different. So from everything I've read, the chemicals of the heat that are released in horseradish is completely different than like a hot sauce.
Okay.
So it's not spicy like hot sauce. It doesn't burn your tongue or your lips like a hot sauce would. But when horseradish is crushed up and made into a sauce or something like that, it releases an oil that hits your sinuses. So that's why when you take a bite of horseradish, it doesn't sting your mouth necessarily. You feel it in your nose.
Yeah.
So it kind of gives a little bit of a rush. Like with wasabi or horseradish, there's a little bit of a rush that you really only get from horseradish or from wasabi. It's a completely different type of feeling than your normal hot sauce. So it really, I mean, there are people that chase that and really like that.
Are you kind of okay with horseradish? Or are you really pro horseradish?
I like it. I'm definitely pro horseradish. I'm not as pro horseradish. Some people eat it on literally everything. Like we get people that come in and buy a ton of horseradish at a time. And I mean, I don't eat it with every single meal, but I definitely like this stuff for sure.
I love it. We talked to a pepper farmer once, and he almost always has a serrano or something in his pocket. So there are people like that with horseradish.
Yep. I don't just have it, in my cooler, on a daily, bring it to lunch with me type thing, but it's prevalent in the fridge for sure.
So I think of horseradish connected to like prime rib.
Mm-hmm.
And oysters and Bloody Marys.
Yeah.
What else? How does it work if it's activating those oils or activating something in my mouth? Does it just make other foods taste better? I mean, it seems to complement things.
Yeah, it definitely complements pretty much any protein is what you see a lot of it with. It complements, eggs. In addition to, prime rib, like you said, steaks, ham, all that good stuff, it really enhances it. I wouldn't say, it takes over. I like to think that it enhances kind of the flavor. It adds something different to most dishes out there.
I love it. So how does your family, like on a night when y'all are going to celebrate horseradish, what's your favorite way to have it?
So personally, I like it with steak the best. A lot of people, I know my mom is huge into prime rib, so when she gets prime rib, she gets it. My dad's one of those people who kind of eats it with, just whatever. Whatever he has, he'll throw it in. It's actually kind of popular in mashed potatoes a little bit, so he throws it in mashed potatoes and things like that.
I have never had horseradish potatoes.
He will eat it pretty much in anything except like breakfast food. It's not for him, but pretty much any meal. I'm usually a dipper of horseradish, and so any protein based, like last night for instance I had brats.
Okay.
Brats, most people probably do mustard, some people do barbecue sauce.
Yeah.
I do a horseradish sauce
See,
with mine. So
you mentioned brats, and Oktoberfest is one of the things that comes to mind for me because I seem to remember a lot of horseradish around for things like that. Are there other like timing considerations, like where the market is big?
Yeah. So Oktoberfest definitely, because Germany is still a very popular area for horseradish.
Okay.
So there's a lot of processors out in Germany. So it is kind of associated with German heritage and all that good stuff. But also, right now it's beginning of April, so we're looking at Easter and Passover coming up in the next 2 weeks or so, and that's actually our busiest time of the year. So the Easter and Passover. Easter is another protein kind of based holiday a little bit, but Passover, it's included on the Jewish Seder plate. So as it's often seen as kind of the bitter herb, and it's used, it's actually our biggest time of the year for our produce market grade root. So without going into too much detail, there's a processor grade and a produce market grade, and the produce market grades are the big ones that you would see in the grocery store. And Passover is our busiest time of the year for that specific root because it's often homegrown,
kosher and everything,
and it's they home grind it.
Yeah,
there's kind of a little bit of a, not necessarily a ceremony, but it's something it's done every year for the most part.
It's kind of a sacred process of the meal. I totally understand. Yeah. That's amazing because I really hadn't thought of Easter as being a big time, but maybe it's because a lot of people have prime rib and the Passover side of things.
Prime rib and ham are popular, and then Passover comes along with it. So we kind of get hit. This year, I think Passover starts on the same weekend that Easter Sunday is. So it was a mad rush around here just a little while ago.
And that's to get the product in the marketplace where people are going to need it in the grocery store, right?
Yeah, so we do a lot of our business to wholesalers. So there's kind of multiple distribution steps that go along the way. So to get it to the grocery store, we send it out so they have enough time to redistribute it so that people can buy it.
And it's hard for me to believe, but Illinois is like huge in horseradish. Is that right?
Collinsville is the self-proclaimed horseradish capital of the world.
The world, not just of the U.S.
Well, of the world, but pretty much, yeah. It depends on who you ask, but that's kind of the slogan of Collinsville. Okay. But of the U.S., I would say probably close to 2/3 of the U.S.'s horseradish is grown by farms that are in Collinsville and some of the surrounding areas. And then of probably half or maybe even a little bit more than half of the continent. So there's some growers up, all around and up in Canada. But Collinsville is one of the hubs
it's like
for sure.
Horseradish Central I'm sitting in.
Yeah, we have a festival and everything. First weekend in June every year.
So what happens at the Horseradish Festival? Do they have wild eating contest or something that would kill people like me?
No. I think there's usually a Bloody Mary contest.
Oh, that sounds good.
So there's a Bloody Mary contest, and then they have little games. It's actually, I think it's going to be the 35th version or 35th annual.
I'll make sure I find the links to their website because they surely have a website. Oh yeah,
they have a website and a Facebook page and all that good stuff. But it's actually on Main Street in Collinsville, and they have some games like root toss and root golf where they basically see how far you can throw or how accurate you are throwing a root, and then a Bloody Mary contest. But it's kind of just a little celebration of the area because it's one of the unique things in southern Illinois, so why not have a festival to celebrate
exactly.
the farmers and the heritage of it.
And we're only 30 minutes from St. Louis.
Yeah,
I mean,
not far.
Way close to downtown St. Louis, especially.
Yeah.
So you keep saying a root, and I'm not sure everybody knows horseradish is a root. So if you think about it, a lot of times people don't have fresh horseradish at home.
Yeah.
But it's a root. And how do you grow horseradish, I guess?
So if you were to look at horseradish, it would be like a giant, if parsnips and ginger had a giant baby, that's kind of what it would look like. It's kind of the color and everything of the parsnips and probably a little bit bigger, but it also has the offshoots that like a ginger has, like where it's not just necessarily one. You dig it up and it's one central root. It has offshoots everywhere. So that's kind of what what it looks like. And I'm sorry, what was the question? I just went off on a tangent.
So, growing it, what does it take, and why is Collinsville such a big deal?
So a lot of it comes down to history. So people have been growing horseradish in this area since the 1800s. So for over 100 years, people have been growing horseradish. And one of the reasons that it has remained in Collinsville is there's a couple reasons, but there's good soil here for it. So
what kind of soils?
So it's
is it a light?
It's not like a sandier, not clay, but like a sandier or siltier, like loams. With good drainage in the area.
Yeah.
You don't want to have too much sand, but to be honest, horseradish isn't all that picky when it comes, just in terms of like optimizing yields. That's what you're looking for, but it's really not all that picky in terms of the ground that it grows in.
But you think about it, you guys are part of probably the floodplains of the Mississippi River, right?
Yeah, the basin, yeah.
So you've got some great land that even if it rains on a day, later in the day, the ground may be able to hold equipment or something.
And it was rich originally, and it still to this day was rich in potash. So like potassium is very important, and phosphorus and sulfur for that root growth. So it's kind of a natural spot where horseradish and root vegetables landed in general. So it's good ground for it.
Yeah.
So that's one of the reasons that Collinsville kind of developed into it. And then another thing that people probably don't think about is they don't really make equipment for horseradish. So it's kind of had to be passed down from generation to generation a little bit because
with the creative people making changes to equipment.
A lot of it is modified potato harvesters and potato equipment because horseradish it's underground. You're usually harvesting deep into the ground, so potatoes are the same way, but there's not that many horseradish farmers. We're talking probably 20 or less in all of North America who do it on a pretty large scale. So, John Deere, Case, they're not out there they don't, for the 20 of them, and, there's not that many of them always in the market for new equipment. So it's kind of something that is a little bit off the radar in terms of you're not just going to go call up a dealer and say, hey, I need a horseradish harvester. They would not answer. They would not have an answer for you.
I think that's a strange part of agriculture that a lot of folks don't know. And I got to tell people now, you've made a video, so we're going to have that able to go up on the website too, so they can see some of this equipment, because I think for a lot of us, if you see it and you've never heard how you have to do things, I've ridden on the back of planters and stuff, and I mean, you have to think fast and move quickly. So my guess is you have farmers here have people who work with them most years, like the same people are working on the back of those planters? Yeah,
a lot of them are bringing in the same crew when they can,
How big is a horseradish field? Because like an acre is like a football field.
Yeah. So they, around here, I mean, there's a good amount of acres that are horseradish. I would say your average field might be, 20 acres or so of horseradish. But
that's a lot of small dishes alongside oysters at restaurants.
Oh yeah, definitely. They are. So a root that you would see in like a cocktail sauce, you see a little bit on the top. That probably came from a root system that was well over a pound.
Wow.
So it's. A little bit kind of goes a long way in horseradish, but like I said, there's not that many people who grow it. So the 10 to 20 growers, kind of got to take care of North America. So it's good that it spreads,
Yeah, and they've got to keep coming up with ways to fix equipment or modify equipment so they can keep doing it.
Yep.
Because they're not going to use that equipment on their corn crops. Do people here grow corn and soybeans like most of the Midwest? Yeah,
corn, soybeans, and wheat are kind of the three main rotational crops that are used. And some actually use sweet corn. It used to be more popular. There's still a few growers in the area who use sweet corn, but I know from like the 40s to 80s, I've heard that sweet corn was the top rotation crop, but that's another. It's not as easy as the field corn in terms of harvest and things like that. So
and horseradish probably takes a lot more labor than field corn.
Yeah.
Right?
So everything from planting to care to harvest is a lot more labor intensive than a lot of your grain crops. Everything's still pretty much planted by hand, whether it's walking or riding and then, kind of dropping. I guess one thing we haven't talked about is what we plant.
Yeah.
So horseradish isn't usually planted as a seed. So
it's more like potatoes or something.
It's a secondary root. So whenever you harvest horseradish, there's a central root and a bunch of secondary roots coming off the side. During harvest, the growers will remove some of those secondary roots and put them to the side, put them in the cooler, and that's actually what they plant
for their seed
for the seed the following year. Yeah, they call them sets. So that's what they plant the following year. So it's something that a lot of them are 12 to 24 inches long. So it's not something that goes, easily through any type of machinery. So they're all kind of planted by hand, and then horseradish doesn't like competition. So there's still a lot of labor in terms of weed removal throughout the year.
Yeah.
And then harvest, like we talked about, there's some people that go along with harvest, and then once you actually get the root out of the ground, you have to trim it by hand as well. So there's a lot of labor and a lot of things that kind of go into it.
How long do the root systems get that you're going to be harvesting?
I mean, a lot of the harvesters that go into the ground are anywhere from 8 to 16 inches underground. So and that's just the vertical depth. So they could be over 2 feet. Some of the larger ones.
Does harvest smell like horseradish?
Yeah, and the horseradish, it does have a way of having.
I mean, if it's
can
got
tell.
Oil, then it also can get on your skin or your clothes. You could smell like horseradish for days.
I notice it when I put on my work clothes, or when I smell my work clothes after a day off. I can, yeah. There's a smell that it seeps in there.
It permeates, I don't know. Yeah. Everything. It's the oil base, yeah. I'm sure is why it happens. So when do you plant horseradish?
So planting is going on right now. It's usually mid-March through mid-May is what I would say is the general time frame for our zone. So
and when do they harvest?
So the old wives' tale, or the old legend, is any month that has an R in it is when you're harvesting. Okay. But the growers around here took the R out of September and they kind of moved it to May. So you get it kind of goes better with the season, and you get higher yields if you harvest in May than you would in September, because it continues to grow throughout that time. So harvest, I guess, goes on from October until when the ground freezes.
Okay.
So this year we had really, really good harvest weather in the fall, and we were able to harvest pretty much until the beginning of January, late December, early January. And then we had a little bit of a wet beginning of the spring season, and we weren't able to get back into the fields until March.
Yeah.
Beginning of March. So they'll continue to harvest until probably mid-May-ish time frame, but they're kind of working on both harvest and planting simultaneously going on right now.
Probably plant other fields, and then they can put some of the ones with the late horseradish maybe into soybeans or something.
Yeah, you could potentially follow it with other crops.
So you may not go horseradish.
You don't go horseradish. Okay. Yeah,
back to back.
It's. I don't know if it's ever been done around here. It's very. If it is, it's very, very rare. A lot of times, folks are on kind of a 3-year rotation. I would say on average.
Yeah, and it gives life a chance to move on. Some of the other things get put back in the soil or taken out by other crops, so you're adding things back in all the time.
Right.
Okay. I'm so amazed that you know this much about horseradish. I really didn't know people like you existed, Matt. I'm going to tell you.
Yeah, well, there's people that know way more than I do.
I was going to say,
promise.
you're pretty young,
Yeah.
so I'm sure like some of the others could really tell a story too.
Oh yeah, and they have the history of everything, of how it, because I think it's, we talked about how manually intensive it is now. I can't imagine what it was like back in the day.
Oh, right?
Yeah.
Right. Well, I love that you pulled some old film footage from like even the 70s and 80s, right? Which is probably before you were really paying attention to stuff. But the difference even today versus then is pretty significant. So they started here in the 1800s. Holy moly.
Yeah.
They were doing horse-drawn.
Probably.
And how long would you... I'm trying to think about, pulling up like a bush that I want to get rid of, like some hedge in my yard. And I can't ever seem to get all the roots. It's like maddening.
Yep.
And so if you're harvesting the roots to plant, to sell them, and then you're going to plant something else, you kind of want to get all the roots up.
You want to get as much as you can. There is a little bit of a volunteer horseradish usually in the, that's what we call them at least, in the next crop that you plant. But there are some herbicides that help with that, and then like I mentioned before, they kind of go pretty deep into the ground. Yeah. So when you go that deep, you get most of them, if that makes sense. But and which is good because growers want to get most of them because it's a weight based crop. It's not like a per root type basis. Right. It's all based on tonnage. Right.
Which is why they're also willing to let them sit around until May, maybe. Right.
Yep. Yeah, in September,
especially if it's good growing weather and stuff.
It'll continue to grow, and then it resumes growing after, so it'll freeze in the ground.
I was going to say it goes dormant.
It goes dormant, and then it resumes. So those roots aren't getting any smaller from, if you start in October instead of September and go until May instead of April, you get,
So horseradish actually keeps something on the ground in winter. Like you see plants, even though they're wilted or... something.
Yeah, turn brown and sad.
Kind of brown and sad. Yeah. Because y'all get snow.
Yep. Yeah, we do.
I mean, it's not going to be pretty green.
Yeah, but they turn back to green probably around the beginning of March. Obviously, weather dependent and all that good stuff. But
they just green right back up.
It comes back to green. Yeah.
And then they start growing again. How do you know how big the crop is and stuff without looking at it? I mean, like underground crops seem really difficult. Yeah. I mean, on a tree, you see if there are apples.
Yeah. We're actually we had pretty good weather. So a lot of the growers in the area are happy with yields this year. But that's one of the things is that they don't really know until you get in the field. So you can ask for projections and all this stuff, and you can kind of work with your historical information that you have, but you don't really know like, oh my, like we got some big roots in this field until you get them out of the ground. But you kind of have a little bit of a general idea. You can take a little bit of a sample and stuff like that, but that is. Sometimes you're surprised when you get your
Does the University
totals.
of Illinois have experts in horseradish? Like a lot of universities have for crops, but horseradish seems so specialized.
Yeah. So University of Illinois and Southern Illinois University are two universities that we kind of work with.
SIUE is like right here.
Yeah, I think for the most part we work with SIUC though. Funny enough. But yeah, the Southern Illinois universities and University of Illinois are two places where we kind of work with the science people that greatly help us understand what's going on with horseradish.
There's a few last questions I wanted to ask. One of them is, if somebody's never bought horseradish in that fresh produce section that we were talking about, the produce market. So if somebody hasn't ever gone in and bought horseradish roots, what would you suggest they need to know as they try and use that at home?
Okay, so a couple things, and I'll give you the long answer on this one. So horseradish is, depending on where you get it, it'll either still have some soil on it or it'll be clean. But either way, you're going to want to rinse it with water, and then a lot of times
is it kind of a hard root?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah. First step would be to rinse it off. Second step for most home grinders is going to be to peel it. So you'll use a potato peeler, and then you'll kind of start to chop up however much you need. But for the most part, as far as tips and tricks, you'll want to look for, if you're trying to pick one out, the straighter the root, the better, because it's just kind of easier to peel, easier to work with. Right. So that's kind of tip number one. And then you'll want to keep it in the fridge, and probably in like a perforated plastic bag or something, but and probably in a drawer, because like we mentioned before, there is a smell that goes along with it. But yeah, it's interesting, because if you haven't ground up horseradish at home, there is a real difference in terms of, oh wow, this stuff is hot, when you grind it yourself versus what you buy in the store, because who knows how long some of that stuff is on the store shelf. So I will say, I don't grind at home a ton, but when I do, it's kind of a...
But does your dad?
He likes it. He doesn't like to cook. He likes it when other people do it for him. But Dennis, who you had met before, he grinds all the time. So he loves doing that. But it is it can be intense. So a lot of times I would recommend using a garage or outdoors, or open up a window.
The patio. It's lovely this time of year.
Open up a window so that you aren't very surprised when you walk into that. When somebody, comes from a different room, they say, "Holy cow, what are you doing in here?" Because there are fumes, and then...
So it's not like onions. It won't make you cry, but the pungency can get to people.
It's kind of like, instead of like cry, you almost get a little bit of that sharp sensation up in your...
You can breathe very clearly for your allergies.
Yeah, it'll clear the sinuses up. It's the same... It'll make you cry in a different way. It'll make you wince. So, yeah, I would say main tips are try to get a straight root, and then cut up as much as you need. And then when you actually prepare horseradish at home, you add vinegar to it. So if you just grated horseradish and then left it for a while, it would end up losing its heat, because it's continuing to release those oils. Up. Yeah. So you use vinegar to kind of stabilize and lock in that heat.
Okay.
So it's pretty simple in terms of like a recipe. You pretty much grind horseradish. You add either a little bit of water or vinegar at the beginning, and then if you add water, you add a little bit of vinegar to stabilize it, and then salt or sugar, and that's pretty much a prepared horseradish. So it's simple to get that kind of base prepared horseradish, and then you can add that to a bunch of different stuff to get a whole lot of recipes.
You want to put a little cream with it. It goes really well with some things.
Sour cream, mayo, mustard, barbecue sauce.
So what's the difference? That was one of the questions I had. What's the difference between it and mustards?
So same family, but
It's part of the brassica family?
Yeah. Yeah, so same...
Mind blown.
So it's in the same little... I think it's Amaryscia brassica, I think is its... I don't even know the...
So broccoli is part of that, the bitter of broccoli.
Yeah, it's like kale and Brussels sprouts and cauliflower.
I'm going to have to put that whole chart up on the website, because we've talked about it, I think, before, because we talked to a canola grower, which is an oilseed, right?
Yeah.
So it makes sense that all of this is connected.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so they're in the same family, but it's... I think...
It was chosen for the root, whereas mustard was chosen for the seeds that were above crop.
Yeah, yeah. But horseradish mustard is actually a pretty popular item.
Yeah.
So it makes sense that they go together.
With brats and stuff.
Yeah, yeah. Definitely.
All right. Did I forget to ask you something? Are you like, oh gosh, you have to know this?
I don't think so. I think we pretty much covered most of it. You guys had some really good questions. I think hopefully we covered it all. Yeah, I would say, for people that are scared of horseradish, give it a try. Yeah. Just go in expecting a little bit of heat, expecting it to be a little bit different, and I think it'll grow on people, even if they don't like it the first time they had it.
Well, I've got some links I'm going to put with this where Andrew Zimmern is showing you how he does his preparations.
Yeah.
Different kinds of dishes to try it with so that it's not just always on the side as something you add as you eat, like prime rib. A lot of people do that.
Yeah.
But there are other ways to try it. So we'll try and encourage the use and encourage people to come over for the festival. I'm going to have to make it now.
Yeah, it's a good time. It's fun stuff. But yeah, it's like you said, it's just something, it's worth a try, and grinding it at home yourself is a little bit of a fun activity. I didn't buy into it when I was younger, but now I could see how that's like it's a real thing to grind your own horseradish at home. It's good stuff.
All right, with that, we're going to wrap it up. Matt did come up with some great video. He's going to be nice enough to let us put that up on the website. So you'll get to see it. And then I'm going to get to go see a field. I've done this before with somebody, but we didn't dare dig anything up because we weren't officially invited to be there. So it was just like a neighboring farmer said, "This is a horseradish field. Can you smell it?" So I'm so excited. I'm a little bit geeked up. So we'll have some photos and videos of that up on the website. So make sure you tell all your friends who love that really spicy, different kind of sensation that horseradish gives to hit you up, and we'll see what kind of contact information we can put for Matt. So if somebody really loves horseradish, maybe there's a horseradish council. Maybe they can get in touch with you on Instagram or something.
Yeah, we got the Facebook page and all that good stuff.
All right, that sounds great.
Thanks,
Matt.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening here till the end. We hope you'll share it with your friends. Tell them to check out what they may be missing. And I hope this brings a whole new look to when you have horseradish served on the side. Thanks so much. This is Janice. Always check us out on groundedbythefarm.com and all our social media channels. We'd love to interact with you a lot more often. Thanks so much.